So Glover Teixeira was supposed to be fighting Yuri Prochazka at UFC 282 in the main event for the light heavyweight world championship, and instead of that, we now have Jan Blachowicz versus Magomed Ankalaev for the world championship as the main event of UFC 282, and a lot of people were shocked when they first heard this information, but then it came out that Glover Teixeira was offered to fight Jan Blachowicz, to which he said yes, at UFC 282, but then was offered to fight Magomed Ankalaev for the belt at UFC 282, and instead said no, and said he'd rather fight Ankalaev in January. He needs more time to prepare. Now, I wasn't going to comment on this, and I wasn't going to make a video about it until we heard from Glover Teixeira himself what the situation was, and Glover Teixeira went on Ariel Helwani's MMA show, and Ariel was asking him about the situation, and he confirmed everything. He said exactly what the story was, and it matched up to the story I just said. He was offered Jan Blachowicz. He said yes to fight on the UFC 282 card. He was then offered Ankalaev, and he said no, and said he would rather wait until January. He needs more time to fight Ankalaev. And I'm here to say one thing. I have no sympathy for Glover Teixeira. And I see a lot of comments going around like, man, the UFC is so disrespectful to Glover Teixeira. How dare they do something like this to Glover, a legend of the sport. And even Ariel Helwani's doing his thing that Ariel does, which is try to fish an anti-UFC narrative out of a fighter that's on his show that negatively impacts the fighter's future in their own career, but positively impacts Ariel's show. He does this so much. He knows if the fighter goes against the UFC, it's not going to end well. He doesn't care about the fighter. He cares about there being an anti-UFC narrative because of the history that he has with the UFC, more specifically Dana White as well. Now, I agree that maybe the UFC should have called Glover Teixeira and apologized and said, hey, we're going to give you the next title shot, maybe, but hear me out. Glover made a massive mistake. Glover Teixeira made a huge, huge mistake. Why did he turn down Ankalaev, saying that he didn't have enough time to prepare for him? And the reason that he gave was that Ankalaev's a tricky, unorthodox striking style that he needs some time to prepare for, and Jan Blachowicz is more of a simple style that he doesn't really have to prepare for, and he's already prepared for Jan Blachowicz. Now, I understand the part of he's already prepared for Jan Blachowicz, but to me, he would have the advantage if he took on Ankalaev at UFC 282, and he has now put himself at a potential disadvantage if he ends up fighting Ankalaev sometime next year. Because he's old, he's not getting any younger, he's only going to run up the chance even more that maybe he gets an injury in his next training camp. He's just been through a hard training camp for a world title fight. Now he's going to put all of that on hold and go through it all over again to fight for the belt against the winner, potentially, of Ankalaev versus Blachowicz, which I do believe is going to be Ankalaev. He's made a massive mistake here. He really has. This was his opportunity, in my opinion, to take Ankalaev by surprise, because Glover Teixeira has been talking about, and he spoke about this on Ariel Helwani's show for a very long time, and I'm surprised that no manager or coach spoke to him about this the way I'm about to in this video. He talks about the fact he needed more time to prepare for Ankalaev because he's a dodgy, unorthodox striker. Yuri is an unorthodox striker who doesn't want to go to the ground, who has decently good takedown defense. I know he fights differently to Ankalaev, but he's a very similar style matchup. I'll tell you what's a different style matchup. Ankalaev preparing for Jan Blachowicz and then getting Glover Teixeira. Yuri and Ankalaev against Glover Teixeira would be awkward. They would switch stances. They would stay on the outside. They would kick at range to the head, to the body, and throw some unorthodox punches in there as well. And try and not get taken down. It's the same style matchup for Glover, with some differences, of course, compared to Ankalaev preparing an entire time for Jan Blachowicz, a simple, orthodox striker who throws a lot of kicks. He does a lot of things well defensively against kicks as well, and also is a very good boxer with some knockout power, who doesn't shoot takedowns and will not grapple against Ankalaev. And then Ankalaev would have had to switch to Glover Teixeira, a guy who doesn't really kick whatsoever, doesn't really play the same kick game that Jan Blachowicz does, and throws different types of boxing combinations with a different style. He doesn't stay at range and pick his shots. He pressures going forwards, and he tries to take you down. Jan Blachowicz does not try and take down his opponents. He's a pure striker. Glover's a pure grappler, pretty much. So in my opinion, waiting longer to fight Ankalaev is a massive disadvantage to Glover. Because Ankalaev's got everything to gain with a full training camp against him. Now, this could all pay off. And Jan Blachowicz could beat Ankalaev at UFC 282 and immediately turn around in April of next year, fight Glover Teixeira in a rematch, and Glover wins the fight again because he's a great style matchup against Jan Blachowicz and ends up taking the belt once more and becomes the champion, then fighting Yuri later on. But on the case to Ankalaev wins, which I believe that he will, Glover's messed up his one big opportunity to win. Not to mention Ankalaev's younger. And also, Glover was preparing for a 5-round fight. Jan Blachowicz and Ankalaev were preparing for a 3-round fight. They're now going 5 rounds. Glover's made a bad judgment call here, man. And it's annoying to hear him say that he would have fought Jan, but not Ankalaev. It's not going to get better by him waiting around. He's made a massive mistake. A massive, massive mistake. He should have jumped at this opportunity. This was his moment to take Ankalaev by surprise. Ankalaev wasn't training for 5 rounds. He wasn't training defensive grappling. You know that. You know that. Do you think he was training defensive grappling against Anthony Smith? Probably not. No. Then he goes into another fight against Jan Blachowicz, a pure striker. No way he needs to harness and hone in his skills on his defensive grappling against Jan Blachowicz. He's probably been preparing his striking in a very specific way the entire camp long as well. And then he would have all of a sudden been dealt with Glover Teixeira, a pressure, volume striker who's trying to take him down the entire time and trying to grapple with him. And he also would have been faced with 5 rounds instead of 3 rounds on short notice. Glover's messed it up. He's messed it up for himself. And I'm hearing a lot of people say, the UFC, they're so disrespectful to Glover Teixeira. They offered him a layup here. And I even saw at one moment he said he was going to wait for Yuri. Yuri might not win when he comes back. Yuri's surgery might not even be a success and he might be out for longer. He might not get a title shot when he comes back. In fact, Glover might not get a title shot against the winner of Ankalaev versus Blachowicz because I know what the UFC does. And I know what contenders will do. I promise you. Rakic soon will call out Glover Teixeira. It will put pressure on Glover Teixeira. I promise something else. If Jamal Hill, in February or March, whenever it is, finishes Anthony Smith, and Glover versus the winner of Blachowicz versus Ankalaev has not been made yet, Jamal Hill's going to call out Glover Teixeira. He might even call for a title shot, but he'll definitely add in the name Glover Teixeira. And that's going to put pressure on Glover. Because all of a sudden, the UFC is going to think to themselves, well, we got this guy willing to fight whoever it takes to get the belt, and we got Glover sitting around doing nothing. And Glover wasn't even a defending champion. Sure, he was beating Yuri on the cards. It wasn't like an Usman-Leon Edwards moment. Yuri won round 3... Round 2 was close, but Glover got it. Round 4 was very close, and Glover got it. Round 5 was probably on its way to potentially being a Glover round, but if Yuri finished strong, he could have swayed it back in his favor. It was a competitive back-and-forth fight that Glover was getting the better of. And they gave him the chance at an immediate rematch, thanks to Yuri and thanks to the UFC. That was the favor that they gave him. And he's essentially here shit all over their favour. And I don't know if he's going to get that same treatment once the winner of Ankalaev Blachowicz is announced. Unless it's Blachowicz. If it's Blachowicz, I can really see them making that immediate rematch with Glover. But if it's Ankalaev, there's going to be pressure on Glover. There really is going to be pressure on Glover. I think he's made a bad call here. He had all the advantages. All of the advantages to try and take this fight. And he's old, man. I know that hasn't stopped him before, and it didn't stop him looking good against Yuri, and it also didn't stop him beating Jan Blachowicz and beating all of the people that he's beaten, but to go through a full training camp the way he did, Come on, man. Come on, Glover, man. You've messed that up. That was his moment. I know what they were doing as well. You know, people are saying, why would they offer him Blachowicz and then offer him Ankalaev? You know what they were doing? They were saying who was going to say yes. Now, maybe there's a case that because Jan Blachowicz was on a plane, they were just really wanting to announce what the next fight was, because as soon as they cancelled the Yuri fight, I'm sure people must have been thinking, well, I'm going to refund my ticket then. So they wanted to have the replacement for the main event immediately announced afterwards, so people would see the news that Yuri was out, but also then immediately see the news that they've still got a main event and the card's still on, rather than there being some kind of panic and people refunding tickets and now not going to go because there's no main event and the card might be off and stuff like that. So they immediately wanted to have a replacement, and maybe, just because Jan Blachowicz was on a plane the entire time and had no idea what was going on, they didn't know if Jan would accept a fight against Glover. So they thought, well, Glover's accepted against Jan. We don't know if Jan would accept against Glover on short notice. He probably would, but what we do know is Ankalaev has, because we've been in contact with him, and that could guarantee a main event if they could get Glover and Ankalaev to agree to each other. But Glover's messed it up. Messed it up for himself. It could work out in the long run, but this is a dangerous, dangerous task, because Ankalaev is young and he's only going to get better, and he's not Glover's age. He's 30 years old, and he's only just turned 30 years old. Well, turned 30 years old 6 months ago, so he's got a long time of being 30 left. Not good for Glover. Risky for Glover, this move. Very risky for an old man of his age to be taking an extra training camp to get in there for a title fight, you know? It's already been a while. It's already been a while since the Yuri fight. They fought in May. You know? They fought in June. So it's been 6 months. It's probably going to be another 6 months before he ends up fighting the winner of Blachowicz Ankalaev. Maybe 5. He's 43. What risk are you running getting injured? If you felt good this training camp enough to fight Jan Blachowicz and enough to fight Yuri for the belt, you should have felt good enough to fight Ankalaev. Bad move from him. Silly move. He had all the advantage. All the jump on Ankalaev here. Think about it. Ankalaev is not training grappling. He's not even training for a 5-rounder. Glover was mentally prepared for a title shot, a 5-rounder, and to try and take down an unorthodox striker at range. Ankalaev all of a sudden is fighting for a world championship. The pressure on him is going to be insane. All of a sudden is now fighting 5 rounds instead of 3 rounds. The pressure on him is going to be insane. All of a sudden is fighting a completely opposite style matchup from a pure striker in Jan Blachowicz to a 90% style-wise wrestler, grappler in Glover Teixeira, who sometimes strikes a bit enough to mix it up. Silly move. Silly move. Maybe the UFC, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know. Maybe they played the game of, let's see which one of these fighters are going to accept it no matter what. So they said, Jan Blachowicz, will you accept fighting Ankalaev for the belt? He said yes. Ankalaev said yes to the Blachowicz fight. Would both of you say yes to the Glover fight? Maybe both of them said yes. And then they were like, well, Glover's playing a game and he's only accepting one of them. Forget him. We'll give the 2 eager guys the chance to fight for the belt who are saying yes to anything, and we'll reward them. Silly move. Silly move. Man, Ankalaev, I think, beats Jan Blachowicz, and I think he beats Teixeira as well. Yeah. Because he's just going to get a full training camp ready to stuff takedowns. And Krylov gave Teixeira all he could handle on the ground. They went to a split decision, scrambling against each other. Constant roll reversals, constant grappling sequence reversals. And Krylov's only gotten better since that Glover Teixeira fight because he's so young. And Nikita Krylov fought Ankalaev in the start of 2021. And he fought Glover Teixeira at the end, like mid-end of 2019. So he had a year and a half extra training in his grappling before the Ankalaev fight. Teixeira and him went back and forth in the grappling to a split decision that Glover barely edged out because I think Krylov fell off of the back position at one point at the end of one of the rounds. And Ankalaev stuffed every takedown that Krylov went for him with. I'm just going to double check to make sure that's true. just before the end of this video. But I'm pretty sure that Krylov maybe got one takedown. Maybe got one takedown on Ankalaev. I'll check it out right now. Yeah, he got one takedown, and Ankalaev took him down 3 times out of 9 and had quadruple the control time of Nikita Krylov and stuffed 5 out of 6 takedowns. And even the one takedown Krylov got, he only got a minute and a bit of control time. So, bad move, I think. Very bad move from Glover. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle Pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye. I think he's made a mistake. And if I was his manager and I was his coach, I'd be saying, no, this is our moment. This is the jump. We can jump this 30-year-old kid with not a lot of experience. And you're only going to be better if you've already fought for the belt. Another factor we can chuck in there as well that made Glover, that should have made Glover take this fight. I don't understand why you thought he had the advantage waiting longer. Ankalaev, this is his first time fighting for a belt. If he wins this, he'll be considered the champion. He'll feel like a champion, and he'll feel like it's just another defense. He's been here before. And he's been here before under crazy circumstances. So he's only going to be more confident if he takes on another fight after this under more normal circumstances. But we'll see how it goes. Like and subscribe, Toodle Pip. See you later. Glover messed up, man. Glover messed up. Goodbye.